Hey, look at that. Okay, and this down here means that it's picking me up. All right, good. One other thing I want to do while I'm here. Okay, so if you happen to be just joining us on this, well, you are, because I haven't put another one up yet. I apologize for that. I will do a recording at home in which I put the first part of this session. And right now we are on Ethernet standards. Well, this isn't working out, Chris. There we go. Let me see if that's even. Yeah, it's still there. Okay. All right. Okay, so setting up a network. So when you go to set up a network, and if you haven't done so at home, I highly recommend that you start doing so now. Start looking at it, even if you do so virtually. You know, even if all you do is take VirtualBox and come in here and like if you need it, you know, sometimes around here in various places you may find, you know, DVDs that have software on them. And if you find a server, take it home. 2008, take it home, put it on an old box you've got at home and run it virtually, and then you can create some virtual computers in there, connect them, and just start playing with it. You know what I mean? Add users, add computers, get used to using Active Directory, that kind of thing. It's really, really good practice. So, all right. So here you see kind of an idea of a small office layout. They've got what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people here, 5 desks set up. So here's an RJ45 wall jack. They've got it on both walls here. So your switch, this one's plugging these two in. Got a switch going to here. Here's your modem. You've got a networked printer for all of these guys. And again, this will be controlled by the switch. Some of the things you're going to be using, and when we get into internet addressing that you'll actually need for this, we talked about loopback plugs before. Obviously, if you're testing a port, whether on the wall or on your machine, a loopback plug is something very handy to have. Tell you whether or not you've got a good port. Same thing with a cable tester. A network multimeter, again, these things are gold. Has anybody used one? Okay, so there are times that you just absolutely can't go without them, right? And well, for example, you know, if you, and I don't have a key to that, or I'd open it for you, but when you get back to a closet and you go in there and you've got a rack full of, you know, however many servers and KVMs and whatever else it's got in there, backup, tape backups, and, you know, so on and so forth, you got a lot of wires, right? And then you've got, you know, however many of those racks you've got, and then you've got all this stuff coming out of the ceiling, and one of them is unplugged and or not working, and you don't know where it goes down the hall, or you don't know where it goes in that closet. And so one of the things you might have to do is actually go to that port. Let's say it's a wall port, and you go to that wall port and you would plug in a little noise maker, a little chirper, and it sends a little signal across that wire. And then you've got to go in that closet with those hundreds of cables with a little wand, and you've got to go over each cable individually and listen for that chirping sound. And that's all that wand does, is listen for that chirping sound. And then that will tell you, oh, you've got the right one now, right? Big pain in the butt. And once you do that once or twice, you pretty quickly realize the value of labeling your cables and making sure that both ends say the same thing, that everybody knows what everything goes to, because you don't want to do that, man. You really don't want to do that. And you really don't want to have to get up in the ceiling and do that on a ladder, standing here, you know, on one of these drop ceilings. These things can make it a heck of a lot easier for you, right? Because they'll actually show you ports. If it's plugged in somewhere and you're not sure where it goes, just plug a cable into it, plug the other end of this, and it'll actually run that whole line and tell you where it is on the other end. You know, it's plugged into this box at this port. There you go. So now, some of these things are, I mean, they do tons of stuff, man. And you can drop $5,000 on one easy. So you know, you don't find the really, really high-end ones a lot of places. But even the lower-end ones are pretty cool, and you want to have one. The toner probe is what I was talking about. This is a toner probe right here. So basically, this is I've never seen one quite like this, but this is a toner. It's just something that you would plug on the other end, and that's all it does, is just emit an electronic signal. And then this wand right here, this probe, you just run it over the wire, and you're going to get some kind of static over every wire you run it over, right? But you're listening for this particular chirp that this thing is making. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. Wire strippers, obviously a crimper. Anybody use the crimper? Okay, all right. It has never been a part of this class that we need to make cables, Ethernet cables, and I think we should. I think it should be a part of the class. Luckily, those of you that are going into networking, you will in your first networking class, or at least I hope you still do. So I'd hate for you to get through here and never know how to make your own cables if you need to. That would be a shame. Punch down tool. So when you come in on the back of one of these on the wall here, you don't have like an RJ45 type connection. What you've got is a bare wire connection. And so you have to punch that wire in, and it actually leads then to the RJ45 connection. So this punch down tool is what is on it's what connects the wires to the RJ45 connection. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. So if you look, you guys can see here, and I'll move the mic or the thing here so we can see. As you can see here, this is the other side. Is that showing okay?
Yeah.
This is the other side of the RJ45, and this part right here would require the punch down to get it in there, okay? So when you terminate in your closet, when it's first coming in, you'll have that tool, and you'll stand in there and terminate every single one of those to your ports, right? And then you'll label those ports, you know, whatever the switch is called, whatever, you know, you use for your labeling. And again, labeling schemes don't matter, just so long as they're consistent and they make sense to you, right? Okay, so here's the other side. This is the front side of that. The punch down tool would be used on the back side of this patch panel here. I do want to talk a little bit about how twisted pairing connectors are wired. I am not going to expect you to necessarily remember this, but I do want to talk about why crossovers were necessary. They're not really so much anymore, but what they were for and so on. So the two things that we're really looking at in this part is a straight through cable, which is also called a patch cable. And it is used to connect a computer to a switch or some other networking device, unlike devices. A crossover cable is used to connect like devices. The reason you use a crossover cable, we actually talked about it before. If you have, for example, if you have on this, you can see that these are not quite, these are sort of opposites on what they do. They don't have the same, but let's say you had not crossover and you had this on both ends. And let's just assume, I'm just making this up as I go, but let's just assume that this brown wire right here is your signal wire. If you plug it in on the other end and there's no crossover, then the signal wire is meeting the signal on the other end. So rather than meeting the transmission wire, which might be this one down here, it's meeting the signal node on the other end, the other port. So you have no communication. So somewhere along the line, you have to make a crossover in that cable so that they swap sides, right? So that if it's number 4 wire on this end, it has to talk to number 8 wire. Somewhere in that transition, you've got to make 4 meet 8 so that when you plug it in on the other side, it's the opposite of where it started. Does that make sense? That's what you would use that with like devices. So if I were putting computers together, if I were putting switches together, if I were putting routers, you know what I mean? Anything that would have the same type of connector, that's when you'd want to use a crossover. Now, the reality is now switches and routers are smart enough that it doesn't matter. Plug something in there and it's going to adjust itself and work. But used to be you had to do that. So here they're showing you the pins. You've got different transmits and receives. Again, some of them aren't going to be used at all, except on gigabit Ethernet. But this kind of gives you an idea. But I do not anticipate that you'll know those for a test, okay? And again, I've said this about many things. With wiring, it's kind of the same too. There are different standards you can use to wire things. There are different methods you can use. Again, none of them is better than the other. You just have to be consistent, right? If you use 2 different types of wiring, you're not having communication anymore, right? So whatever you decide on is fine, but that's what you got to stick with. And here's the crossovers so that they're actually talking. And yes, like anything else, you can get an adapter for a crossover. If all you've got's a patch cable and you have to have a crossover, believe it or not, they make an adapter for it. Again, that seems like a shame. It seems like you just want to snip that and make it a crossover. And, you know.
Yeah.
All right.
Some people aren't comfortable snipping cables.
Right. I suppose that's true of anything, right? I mean, so this kind of gives you the rundown on snipping cables. Unfortunately, I don't have the stuff in here for it, nor will we test you on it. But if you guys want to do it sometime, I will absolutely go get the stuff. I'll just have to talk to Lee first and then get the supplies. And we'll spend a little time doing that.
Yeah, I definitely want to do that.
Okay. All right. Again, same thing. Here's a punch down tool in action. And again, it's just, you're just punching it into one of these, single unit jack. So not only does it have on the ends, it has the metal punch down, but it also has a razor blade, sort of very sharp edge, where once it's punched down, it comes and cuts off the rest of the wire. So it does it for you all in one movement. So you get a nice clean, you get these shavings here at the end. All right. So here is just talking about, troubleshooting your network. And you know how they love their flow charts. Can you browse the web? If yes, then you've got network access. If no, first thing you want to look at is your port. Do you have any indicator lights telling you it's on? If no, try a loopback plug. See if that thing is working. If you're actually on a PC, one thing that you might do is start by BIOS. Go in there and look and see if it's enabled. Another thing you might do is just go and look at Device Manager, see if it's showing you an error on that physical port. All right. So that does it for that one. I am going to move on to the more difficult one now. Although I am going to pause this for a moment and look at something. I think it is. It seems like it's broadcasting. It says live.
Well, it's still broadcasting. You just stop sharing screens.
There's no way to pause it, is there?
You could always just stop and start.
See how it's top left, how it says. He did say stop screen sharing at the bottom.
Yeah, I stopped that. All right, I'm going to stop this broadcast. Number one, I want to see if it loads. And number two, I need to go find another resource.